Our guest on this edition of CityWide is Christopher Meyer, Vice President of External Affairs at Consumer Reports. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Chris, you were on the show a few years ago. Your title was Vice President of Consumer Union. Now you're Vice President of Consumer Reports. What happened?
86% of the country has heard of Consumer Reports. 14% has heard of Consumers Union. In order to continue to promote the brand of Consumer Reports, we wanted to emphasize the advocacy part, but under the umbrella of Consumer Reports, because we believe that a younger audience who's very interested in the work that Consumers Union has done to protect consumers on finance and healthcare and food safety, we could do that work even more helpfully under the Consumer Reports umbrella. We'll see.
So why do consumers need a union?
Because every day the world becomes a less fair place to consumers. The union part actually started back in 1936 when we first started, and the workers needed a union, and so they formed this place called Consumers Union. So while we are still a union with CWA, half our staff is unionized.
You actually really are a union.
We actually are a union. But we also have tried to get consumers to think of themselves as a unified force. So this week, we just passed the 1 million mark for online activists who take action either through keystrokes online or by lobbying or doing on-the-ground activities. So more and more, we believe consumers need to be unionized, but in fact, we are a union.
So we're in a kind of a transformative period, both in terms of the economy and in politics. Things are really unsettled. The one thing that seems to unite both the Tea Party folks and the Occupy Wall Street folks is the notion that the system's rigged, that the system isn't fair, that they're being taken advantage of. Is that an overstatement of what's really going on in the economy?
No, and that's why Consumer Reports is so important, because our reach is national and broad and includes libertarian Tea Party folks who like our marketplace reform piece that is going after corporations. And then it's also the fact that sometimes you do need government regulation. So we have a lot of more liberal subscribers who see us as the place to complete the consumer experience. So if you're feeling angry at bank fees that are too high or just too petty, we do stories about that. It was the lead of our most recent issue. But for consumers who want to see consumer action, we are huge supporters of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. On the other hand, sometimes government can't really stop Bank of America from acting stupidly. So when they say that we're going to charge you $5 for the privilege of using a debit card that, by the way, we marketed heavily so that you could use it, we went after Bank of America directly. And so everybody likes that. So the Tea Partiers have a point, which is, government can't do everything on behalf of consumers, but government regulation could help stop a repeat of what happened just prior to the last time it's on your show in 2008 when Lehman Brothers went under.
But take that Bank of America. So what does it mean that you went after them? Did you tell people to boycott Bank of America?
No, we're not in the boycott business. We're more in the Bank of America and Wells Fargo and SunTrust and others. We're going to unleash our million-person army and let you have a taste of what it means to have consumers going after you personally. And in fact, consumerism and consumer protection is one of the areas where people are starting to feel very empowered on their own. So for example, recently Verizon tried to charge people $2 for the convenience of paying online. We were there, but we didn't even need to be there because within 24 hours, lots of people on their own had found Verizon. So what's been interesting is consumer protection is now becoming something that everybody feels connected to, whether it's a Tea Party or Occupy Wall Street.
But look, I'm going to talk about the president and the Consumer Financial Protection Agency in a second, but have any of the Republican candidates talked about any consumer issues?
No, because unfortunately, consumer issues don't make or break elections. The first day that President Obama was in office, he unveiled this great website that talked about all the issues that he was going to work on. Never had the word consumer in it, because in the election before, neither he nor McCain were ever asked any questions about consumer issues as they were called consumer issues. But almost everything about that election had a consumer attached to it.
Give me a for instance.
Well, healthcare reform. 1 out of every $6 spent in America is a healthcare dollar. That's a consumer issue. So in fact, healthcare reform, although it was never dressed up that way, in fact, the most popular parts of that law that passed in 2010 are the consumer protection pieces. Financial regulation wasn't really called a consumer issue in 2008. People thought the financial world was melting down. But in fact, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, as part of the Dodd-Frank bill that became law, is about consumer protection. So no one calls it consumer protection, but all the good reforms that come out of it are about consumers.
So what do you say to those Republican candidates, and I think this is pretty much all of them, that say at this time with the fragile economy, with unemployment still at unacceptable levels, that government regulation is basically a job killer, and that the government should get out of the way and let consumers make individual choices about whether they want to buy health insurance or not?
The focus groups that we look at, and when we talk to our activists, Republicans and Democrats are united in feeling as if they are getting taken advantage of, and they don't have the same reflexive dislike for intervention that the candidates do. So I think the Republican candidates would be wise to look more carefully at what people care about. And what they want are common sense solutions to getting ripped off every day. Sometimes it's government, sometimes not. The public is very comfortable with that. When candidates go after quote unquote job killing regulation, they tend to focus on environmental issues, which again I think is a red herring, but they tend to go after that. Their dislike as a body, as a group for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has a lot more to do with what they believe to be an unaccountable way that the agency is funded, and that you have a director as opposed to a group of commissioners, which is how other consumer agencies are
What is
formed.
this agency supposed to do?
This agency is supposed to protect consumers, right?
Well, what does that mean?
For example, when non-bank entities want to make loans in the predatory lending field, there's no regulation there. This agency is going to be a cop on the block, which they haven't had before. We had to have a director in place, according to the law, before they could go after these predatory lenders.
Like a pay loan company,
Yeah,
or,
exactly.
or a tax refund company,
Yeah.
something like that?
Right now, there is no government cop on the block to protect consumers. Even something more basic, when Elizabeth Warren was setting up the agency, what she wanted to do, and I think what the agency will do, is have a plain language, one-page form for government forms like a mortgage piece. I don't know about you, but I've been an experienced consumer person for 30 years. I'm trying to refinance now. I still get sweaty palms as I'm getting down to it, because I know I'm going to get socked with a fee at the end, or I know that the language I'm reading is gobbledygook. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way when it comes to a mortgage form. It doesn't have to be that way when it comes to a health insurance disclosure form. I can't believe Republicans and Democrats alike can't unite behind plain language.
There's been a lot of push of the notion that if you just give consumers the information that they need, they'll make the right choices. If the information is accurate and it's complete, they'll make the right choices. On the other hand, the notion that Social Security should be privatized and people should have to choose between an array of investments or mutual funds scares a lot of people as well.
Well, this became a big fight in health reform, time to health savings accounts as being the panacea. Why not just give people the money they need? Well, in fact, it is a canard, because you need to have a structure in place, and because there is power in group buying. I mean, one of the philosophical issues that consumer groups like mine faces is there a social contract anymore when it comes to Social Security or Medicare or even the role of government? I believe that the Republican Party is too atomized in their approach, which is they believe that just get government out of the way and consumers with their purchasing power can change the marketplace. I wish that were true. In my experience, that has not been true. On the other hand, my friends who believe that government regulation can solve everything, well, if that were the case, we wouldn't have had the meltdown in 2008. So the reason I love working for Consumer Reports is that it takes a much more common sense and flexible approach to change. We believe in a marketplace, but we believe that sometimes that marketplace needs correction. Sometimes it's through our information or other organizations' information that corporate America, which can be more sensitive to change than, say, Congress, they sometimes will make change. You know, I can't imagine either party in 24 hours changing on a dime their policies. But Verizon did after 1 day, and Bank of America did after 3 weeks.
So is it about putting your thumb on the scale, or is it about just making sure that the scale is accurate?
It's kind of both. I mean, we're based on evidence-based inquiry and scientific inquiries. That's really why people pay a fee to buy our magazine or to subscribe online, and that's the currency. And one of the things that we have to fight is this tendency now to not believe evidence. And that's one of the hardest things that we had to fight in the healthcare battle was an attack on evidence-based medicine. That's not something that I was used to. So for me, it is getting science to be seen as the most important determinator when it comes to buying products or giving consumers information to do a service. It should be based on something that's scientific.
We're going to talk about convincing consumers to use science in making their purchasing choices when CityWide continues right after this.
Traditional light bulbs actually generate 9 times more heat than light. Switch to Energy Star light bulbs, and you'll realize just how much cash you are really burning through. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at energysavers.gov.
Welcome back to CityWide. We're speaking with Chris Meyer from Consumer Reports. So before the break, we were talking about Consumer Reports' efforts to get consumers to use facts, objective facts, facts based on scientific analysis as part of their buying decisions. Other than reading Consumer Reports, how do they know what's true? There seem to be so many competing claims, and how are you supposed to know what's really true?
Well, first, everyone should read Consumer Reports. But if that's not enough, the trick is how do you get information that the public can use that's bite-sized? So 30 years ago, we believed we were the oracle, Consumer Reports. We're not anymore. The public wants to know what government thinks, what industry thinks, hopefully what Consumer Reports thinks, and they really care what each other thinks. So the organizations that are able to aggregate user reviews and take government data, of which there is a huge amount, but it's never packaged in a meaningful way, and then take away the industry speak from what is often really good industry information and combine it, whether it's in an app or in a magazine, they'll be the information winners. And we have a lot to learn at Consumer Reports from smaller players who have figured out some things. So there are apps out there for people who can aggregate airline data in a way that can give pricing, comfort, and other passenger-friendly information. The government should be doing this through DOT. Consumer Reports should be doing this. So we need to learn from what small startups are doing to provide consumer-friendly data.
The New York Times business section, not in the general news section, not in the home section or style section, but the business section has a column once a week now called The Haggler. And The Haggler went on the attack on the Better Business Bureau because it felt that it was covering up for some members who had treated consumers badly. Well, if you can't trust the Better Business Bureau, why can you trust anybody?
The Better Business Bureau is a credible source of information, but they have a business model that is based on those businesses paying in. And so people are always going to be inherently skeptical whenever they feel as if an institution, even a venerable one, has their opinions that may be based on corporate influence. One of the great things about Consumer Reports is that for 75 years, we have refused to take any ads in our magazine or online. We have a very strict non-commercialization policy to the point where if we find out that an entity has used our ratings without our permission, we will go after them. And the marketplace, our subscribers are our best resources. That is what allows us to maintain some sort of some pristine value that I think people are looking for. But I will also say that more and more our brand is in danger of erosion because powerful entities like Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook are able to aggregate information in a way that they know more about our subscribers than we do. And so no longer is our competition necessarily the best car site or the best electronic site. It's Google and Apple and Amazon. And that's really quite dangerous because they use science differently. They have the most powerful algorithms to learn more about my needs to buy in books than I do. So that's really the challenge, is how can Consumer Reports and other places like us carve out a space that is meaningful, that can command a fee? That's really the challenge for not just us, but other groups.
Aside from the impact that it has on your organization, is privacy, and particularly online privacy, is that a consumer issue?
It's a huge issue. And it's tricky because the more powerful search engines out there are mining the internet for as much scraps of information that the public actually wants, because it can help them figure out in a crazy world when they get home at night what are the wines they want to buy. On the other hand, they are vociferous in going after Facebook and other places for violating their privacy. So it's one of the areas that we are spending a huge amount of time on to make sure that both we're using best practices and that we are representing the public who care very much in a world where they want to control at least their social media, that their privacy is respected and that their information is not being sold. But it is being sold every day.
You talked a little bit about the president making this appointment for the Consumer Financial Protection Agency. He appointed someone over the objections of a substantial number of United States senators who said it wasn't about that person individually, whether that's true or not. As you mentioned, they objected to the structure of the organization, although it had just been voted in by the Congress a couple of years ago. Was that a gutsy move on the president's part? And did he do it because it was a way to stick his finger in the eye of those Republican obstructionists, or is Barack Obama a good consumer president?
His record in the first 2 years is a record that is exemplary. Healthcare reform, financial reform, food safety reform. All that happened in the first 2 years, all landmark, those areas had not been touched for decades, and the world will be a better place. But the president also needs to continue to fight to help implement those reforms, and that's been tricky. And the president has sometimes had a hard time finding his voice to help protect and implement those victories. So that aside, 2011 was a very tough year to pass anything new because we had the Gordian knot of Republicans viewing, maybe accurately, that by saying no, they could improve their standing heading into 2012, and a president who I think thought consumer issues are important, but I have this economy that is in free fall. And that's what happens sometimes to consumer issues, is that when you get issues, or jobless rates hitting 9%, all of a sudden what's called a consumer issue falls to the wayside, even though I believe that both parties could have used consumerism to better reflect their points of view that could have helped consumers. So I think he had a very good 2 years, had a more difficult time since then on all of his issues, some of it of his own making, some of it not.
You know Barack Obama.
I am fortunate that I was part of a crew that hired Barack Obama to be an organizer for the New York Public Interest Research Group, where I worked proudly for 20 years, to be a campus organizer at City College in the spring of 1985, yes.
And how did he do?
Good organizer. We were sorry to lose him, but we knew at the outset during the interview that he was going to be heading out to Chicago in a few months, but we were happy to have him for those few months. He did a good job.
So you've been in the organizing business and the advocacy business for a very long time now. How has it changed?
Well, it's changed in some of the easy ways. No such thing as Facebook 30 years ago. So the way that you had to organize was very much like Paul Revere. I mean, we had to go classroom.
Or Ron Paul.
We had to go classroom to classroom to get our message out using legal pads. Now there are more sophisticated ways to get your message out in a much more profound and easy way. On the other hand, it's still about counting votes. It's still about doing the blocking and tackling of talking to people. So even though we have a 1 million person online chain of people across all 50 states, the 30 people that have found each other, that have organized around patient safety, in particular trying to stop hospital-acquired infections, are the most powerful and effective group that we have. So it's still the same thing. You have to still sweat it out, and you have to show up and lobby. You have to write the letters to
That seems to be such a dirty word.
It's never been to me. Lobbying is a noble profession. It is, you can't do the work that we do without paying attention to the processes and rules, whether it's the New York City Council or Albany or Congress. And those organizations that think they can skip those steps and just have a social media strategy can win a day, but they can't win a long-term issue.
So let me ask you the corollary to that, because the elephant in the room and the donkey in the room are elections. And I would suggest to you that there are limits to the effectiveness of advocacy and lobbying unless you're actually in a position to influence the outcome of an election and reward the people who are sharing your values and get new people if you think there are folks that are in the way. But Consumer Reports doesn't endorse candidates, do they?
We do not. We are religiously nonpartisan. And I think that is part of our strength. It makes us unbiased, independent. And we also sometimes have to stand on the sideline when people write 5, 6, 7-figure checks from the super PACs that got accelerants from the Supreme Court decision in Citizens United, which I think will go down as one of the worst decisions that the Supreme Court has ever ruled. That's more of a personal view than a Consumer Reports view, but it's absolutely going to make politics more corrosive. It's going to make people more cynical about the body politic.
But you're not suggesting that no corporations have any First Amendment rights. Certainly the New York Times company has First Amendment rights.
Absolutely. I'm not trying to rewrite the law. I think that there are measured commercial speech rights for corporations, but I personally don't believe that corporations are people.
Let me turn from the national to the local for a second, because again, Consumer Reports, national organization with an international website, which is www.
consumerreports.org.
I think I can spell that.
Thank you.
But you're also a keen observer of New York City, New York State. So just briefly, Andrew Cuomo, is he a consumer governor? And then after that, tell us what you think the consumer issues are for the candidates for mayor in 2013.
Well, first, I give the governor great credit for showing that you can govern after a bipartisan set of failures and missteps. The governor has governed. His issues in the first year have been more about showing he can govern, and I think less about some of the blocking and tackling, although he has done, and Attorney General Schneiderman have both done, I think, a very good job on different issues. I think the issues of the day in New York State and New York City are no different than they are on a national scene. I feel as if there is predatory lenders that are a huge problem here in New York. Debt collection is a big problem in New York State and New York City. No one will win a single election on this, and I'm not urging any of the candidates running for mayor to all of a sudden adopt that. But if you look at the Department of Consumer Affairs website, what they say are the top 10 tips for the new year is what Consumer Reports would say, which is to be careful about who you talk to about refinancing mortgages. It's about saving. It's about saying no when people have easy ways to reduce your debt. Again, no one's going to win an election, but those are the key things. I think an underlying issue that I think affects the Hispanic community that has not gotten huge play but will is this issue of remittances, where people want to send money back home. It's been going on for generations and decades. There are now consumer protections built into the Dodd-Frank bill on a federal level that I hope become an issue that the governor and the mayor approach.
So the bottom line for most consumers is if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably not true. My thanks to Christopher Meyer, Vice President of External Affairs at Consumer Reports. I'm Ken Fisher. Thanks for joining us on this edition of CityWide.